I see rugby and the development it's given me as giving me the foundations to do all the stupid shit I do now from a training point of view and a character building point of view. And I would love for my kids that don't yet exist to have that experience in the future. But yeah, a lot of the question today has been focused around what does that future look like? Because you've got 3 kids.
Yeah.
Your wife's very bought in.
Yeah.
But is there a part of you that thinks risk reward here, and that's coming from somebody that's taken the game to the extremes?
Yeah, that's the other thing I talk about. Things I get asked a lot is around kids playing. Would I let the kids play? I almost retired at one point because of head knocks. So I had my first concussion when I was 19 and got knocked unconscious for 5 minutes, swallowed my tongue, in hospital for overnight, scans. It's a really, really bad one. And then it's a crazy thing to say, but I was lucky in that my concussions, when I got them, I was unconscious. So there was no choice of playing. And that's the real danger, isn't it? They talk about is when you, in a second, I don't know what they call it, get a concussion and playing again and playing again.
Yeah, concussion syndrome. Yeah.
So I was quite lucky that in that regard, not lucky to get concussed, obviously, or be unconscious, but it removed me from the field. So I had probably 4 concussions, known concussions. I've got friends that played amateur rugby who had concussions and probably had less treatment than I did, or less awareness, or less, care. So I was never forced to play. I was never asked to play when I was concussed. I was never forced back. I always had always viewed it as something very serious. Obviously it is, which sounds a crazy thing to say, but I know I played in Wales and guys would play with concussions. And I'd say, how you feel? I'm not good. Why are you playing? I'm out of contract this year. I'm a young guy, I've got to play. And that's never going to change until you find an objective tool which measures concussion, which says you cannot play. We won't get there, but yeah, I think the kids' game is safer than it's ever been. I think, to your story and to, I remember at school watching a cup final at Dollar playing Merchiston, actually. It was probably 2002, and a guy, Jonathan White, Joffe, Scotland Rugby teams, he was meant to be the next big thing, and he got concussed and staggering all over the pitch, crab walking, and he came back on and played. And I'm like, that's mad. Yeah, that's madness that was ever allowed. But that was the way the game was managed, and there's no understanding. I think that would never happen now.
No.
And kids now, I've got my eldest is 10, and there's a kid in his class who hit his head, and you can't play for a couple of weeks now. And there's just so much. I think the point I'm trying to make is the kids' game is safer. The kids' game is not faster. Kids are not bigger than they were.
Where do you think that threshold crosses?
Probably when you get kids who are still kids at 16, 17 playing with men. So going to professional rugby, and I think I watch school rugby now, and it's a much faster game than when I played. And there's S&C, and there's diet, and there's pathways, and there's loads of going on. So I think it definitely reaches a point where there's got to be a bit more of an awareness around it. But you're not going to make the game safe, and that's not a popular thing to say, and it will never be a safe game.
In the same way that you can't make F1.
You can't drive the car safely.
As safe as it can be,
exactly.
But if you crash into a wall at 200 miles an hour,
it's mitigating risk. How do you mitigate risk? How do you make parents feel confident enough that if there's head knocks, they're going to be looked after? How do you limit contact at training? I think contact at training, I didn't do any at the end of my career because I was falling apart. But Scarlett's was great. We basically did none. It's like we were playing well, and it's like we don't need to do contact. But then I came to Edinburgh. It's like we do contact every day. We're tackling every day. And I'm like, why are we tackling every day? And I had shoulder surgeries, wrist surgeries, concussion, bulging disc. I'm like, I'm not tackling every day. I've tackled for 30 years. I know how to tackle.
But you knew that because of experience.
Yeah, and the young guys wouldn't have that confidence. And I was confident enough to say, do you know what? And I would always back up at the weekend. So I don't think you have to train contact. I actually think there's no reason to train. We would call it bone on bone. So without pads in training, I don't think there's any need for it. Maybe in pre-season, but I think that's probably the way to make the game safer. Limit training, which is by all accounts they're doing it. Play less games. I know there's constant studies into how to improve concussion awareness. How do you improve return to play protocol? But it's much better than it was. It's much better than it was. And the game's not the game. People, and this is the thing that frustrates people. Say the game is faster. People aren't bigger, or that certainly. 2007, 2008 was when I think it was probably the biggest.
I think the 15 players on the pitch as a whole are larger, but the
Yeah.
actually, I think, yeah. I mean,
The reason for
centers,
Yeah.
centers specifically.
The reason for increased concussions, is the ball's in play longer now.
Yeah.
The way the game's refereed now is actually the ball is in play for 50% more time. You've got 50% more collisions. You're asking players to do more in the time that the ball's live. There's an expectation that front row forwards are not just scrummaging; they're involved in high speed collision impacts. So actually, the game's not necessarily. It's better coached and it's a bit quicker. Is that the ball's in play a lot longer. So the demand on players is better. S&C and science and nutrition and all that stuff. There's a bigger understanding of how to get more out of players. So you're asking, and the demands are greater on players. But your brain, it takes one knock and your brain says night night.